Good evening and welcome to the MGH Surgery Virtual Sub-Internship webinar. My name is John Mullen and I'm the Program Director of the General Surgery Residency Program at the MGH. We're thrilled that you've chosen to spend an hour with us on this Monday evening to learn a little bit about the MGH program and this application process during this unprecedented time. We recognize that COVID-19 has really upended the whole sub-internship application and interview process. And so the genesis of this webinar really started at the surge of that pandemic, when we felt it was most important to reach out to medical students around the country to support them during this time and to give you guys the opportunity to learn a little bit about our program from our faculty and residents. We're thrilled to have nearly 350 registrants for this webinar. And we're also thankful that many of you submitted questions in advance, and we'll try to answer as many of those questions as we can. I want to review a few housekeeping items before we start. Note that the chat function is turned off, but you can submit questions through the Q&A function. And one of us will be collating those questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. This audio will also be recorded, so for friends of yours, or for you, if you're unable to stay for the entire webinar, we do plan to post this on our residency webpage. Let's review the agenda for tonight's meeting. After I complete this brief introduction, I'll refer you to some helpful online resources that you might want to avail yourselves of. We'll then overview our MGH General Surgery Residency Program, as well as our integrated 4+3 cardiothoracic track. We'll then leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers, and then have some concluding remarks and an announcement for our next webinar. Next slide. We're thrilled to have an extraordinary group of panelists tonight, including 5 of my fellow faculty members and 5 trainees. Dr. Keith Lillamo needs no introduction. He's our chair of surgery. Dr. Tor Sunt is our chief of cardiac surgery. Dr. Yolanda Colson is our chief of thoracic surgery. Denise G is one of our associate program directors and our director of surgical simulation. And Dr. Motaz Kadan is our advanced surgical clerkship director. In terms of trainees, we're lucky to have our administrative chief resident, Dr. Danielle Cameron, who graduates in just 4 days. Danielle will be moving on to Boston Children's Hospital to do a pediatric surgery fellowship. 2 of our interns are joining us tonight, James Navalanek and Nora Liang, who will bring an interesting perspective as they both did sub-Is. James hails from Dallas and the UT Southwestern program, and Nora from San Francisco and the UCSF program. Shauna Osho is one of our recent graduates, and he is a member of the 4+3 cardiothoracic surgery track and will be able to provide a perspective of a trainee in that training paradigm. And lastly, Naomi Sell is one of our rising PGY4 residents. She's finishing up her time in the research years. So let me point you to a few online resources that you all might find helpful before we delve into our program. First, I'd like to refer you to our residency webpage. In this site, you'll find an extraordinary amount of information about our program, from the rotation schedules to the curriculum. There's a summary of all of our residents and what their research projects entail. There's statements about our commitment to diversity and inclusion, and lots of pictures showing the camaraderie of our residents. Please also note our social media pages where you can learn a lot about our program as well. In addition, I'd like to refer you to 2 recent papers that were published in the COVID-19 section in Annals of Surgery. The first is a primer for conducting successful virtual interviews. This was written by 4 of our rising chief residents who just completed a number of interviews for fellowship. And not only does this primer have a tremendous amount of information for applicants, but also for programs as well. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And in addition, Naomi Sell, who's one of our panelists tonight, has written a really nice article on the implications of this pandemic on the whole application process and the match. And it was in this article actually that we came up with the idea for a webinar to serve as a way for you all to get to know a little bit more about our program. Lastly, there's a useful online resource from the AAMC, which is also a nice preparation guide for virtual interviews that you might find helpful. So at this point, we're going to review our program, and I'd like to turn things over to our Chair of Surgery, Dr. Keith Lillimo.
So thank you, John. John's been kind enough to give me 3 minutes to talk about the entire 200-year history of the MGH and the Department of Surgery. But I won't use all of them. First of all, I want, if you put the next slide up, to just share with you what a pleasure it is to walk these halls. They have three of the greatest surgeons in American history as past chairs around to help guide me. And it may be small and the contact may be minimal, but the opportunity to meet these guys on a week-to-week basis in surgical grand rounds and at teaching conferences is very special. I can tell you about being the third oldest hospital in the United States. We will be celebrating our 200th anniversary in a couple years. So many of you, if you match here, will be part of that celebration as we celebrate 200 years of taking care of patients. I can tell you we're the oldest teaching hospital in the HMS system, with a legacy going back to physicians who fought at Bunker Hill. I can tell you about the great contributions of the Department of Surgery that will affect you every day. The first demonstration of ether anesthesia, which was a landmark here at the MGH, or the fact that now, like everywhere in the country, has a horizontal training program, began at the MGH, eliminating the fear of the pyramid that many people grew up with. I could talk about the MGH being consistently ranked in the top 3 or 4, or even #1 by US News and World Report for the last 20 years, or how the US residency has been ranked #1 by Doximity for the last several years. But to be honest, reputation and history are great, but it's not what you should consider when you decide whether you want to train here at the MGH. I want to spend most of tonight telling you about the great resident experience, both in and out of the operating room, including the research years. We want to tell you where our residents match for the most competitive fellowships and how their careers can advance beyond their time at the MGH. We want you to get a flavor of the MGH culture and how we strive to create an environment of education, teamwork, mutual respect, regardless of gender, race, or ethnicity, and to create as close to a family atmosphere in surgical training that I've ever observed in 40 years of academic surgery. So I look forward to hearing the rest of my colleagues' presentation and taking whatever questions, and I'll pass it off now to Motaz Kadan, who is the individual who coordinates all our advanced surgical clerkship activity. Motaz?
Thank you very much, Dr. Lillimo. So it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you today. And as Dr. Lillimo and Dr. Mullen were just saying, I usually manage the advanced surgical clerkship. And it's obviously with our deepest regret that we're unable to host some of you who are due to be here as our sub-interns this year. Having said that, hopefully we can give you a good flavor of this, and I won't be long because I'd like to pass you over to our residents, our terrific residents, as soon as possible. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about our national leadership and our distinguished alumni from this program. But just to say really that there are several faculty from our program who hold important leadership positions across some very prestigious societies and committees across the country today. And I think the next 2 slides really give you a good flavor of what we're looking at here. But you can see here, there are several members of our faculty who hold important leadership positions like presidents and vice presidents of several societies, including American Society of Transplantation. You can see here the American Association of Trauma Surgery. We've had an exceptional presence, I would say, in the American Association for Thoracic Surgery, and we are all bursting with pride that our division chief of thoracic surgery, Dr. Colson, is the current vice president and will be the first female president of this highly prestigious society. You can also see here American Pancreatic Association, Society of University Surgeons, American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. And moving on through this list, obviously our chair, Dr. Lillimo, who was previously president of the American Surgical Association, but also a member of the National Academy of Medicine. Included on here as well, the Association for Academic Surgery, Halstead Society, and then very important to us and representative of our sort of diverse nature, we have the president of the Association of Women Surgeons and a previous president of the Society of Black Academic Surgeons. And of course, Dr. Warshaw, who was president of the American College of Surgeons previously. And then in terms of our distinguished alum, this is really important to us because when asked about what type of a program we are, well, indeed, we are a program who trains the future leaders of surgery. And again, it is with sort of a real honor to be able to kind of put this list together. And you can see here several members who have gone on to become CEOs, presidents, and chairs of surgery and directors of some incredible programs here, as you can see. And of course, even CEO and executive director of the American Board of Surgery came from the MGH. And just looking through on this final slide next is some of the presence that we happen to have had, especially in pediatric surgery, which is very interesting. And you can see here numerous chairs of pediatric surgery at some of the biggest hospitals, including Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP, Cleveland, CMO at Stanford and Lucille Packard, Boston Children's, of course, to mention Dr. Harrison, who's considered the father of fetal surgery at the Fetal Treatment Center of UCSF, but also Memorial Sloan Kettering and the University of Texas system as well. And with that, it's my privilege to hand over now to one of the best people I've ever worked with, our graduating chief resident, Dr. Danielle Cameron, who'll talk to you about operative case volumes.
Thank you, Dr. Kadan. It's such a privilege to get to speak about the program that I'm so in love with and so sorry to be leaving in just a week from now. It's sort of unimaginable to not walk through the halls each day in just a week from now. So I'll be presenting on what I think is one of our greatest strengths, our operative volume as residents. The first slide shows the cumulative volume by resident year, and this is summary data for the last academic year. You can see that for our junior residents, there's absolutely no trouble achieving the ACGME minimum case volume of 250 cases in the first 2 years. And you can see that as you advance into your chief year, you'll have well above the minimum required. Next slide. This slide, I think there's a lot to learn from this. First, you can see that we are well above the American Board of Surgery minimum requirements. For example, pancreatectomy, the minimum requirement is just 5 cases, and you can see the average number of cases for a graduating chief resident is 28, with some residents graduating with over 40 cases in just their 2 years on the chief services. You can also see that we have a great breadth and depth across all disciplines. And finally, if you look specifically at vascular or endocrine, for example, or even thoracic, which we'll hear about later from my colleague Shauna, you can see that if you have a specific interest in certain disciplines, you have the opportunity to do a large volume of cases relevant to your clinical interests. For example, if you are interested in thoracic, you could do up to 173 cases in just 5 years. So next I'll turn your attention back to our program director, Dr. Mullen, who will speak about the fellowship match.
Thanks, Danielle. So I think an important question that you as an applicant need to ask when you look at a general surgery training program is, where do the graduates go? As is common with most academic programs, about 90% of our graduates move on to fellowship training and ultimately an academic career. And so it's important to know, where are graduates going? Are they getting their fellowships of first choice? And I'm proud to say that almost 95% of our graduates get their first choice of fellowship match. And these are some of the most competitive fellowships in the nation. This slide just briefly summarizes the fellowship matches of the last 3 years of our graduates, and this spans, of course, all specialties. I want to make special highlight of cardiothoracic surgery. You'll hear a lot about our 4+3 integrated program, which many of our residents stay in. In pediatric surgery, which is arguably the most competitive fellowship match, in the last 3 years, we've placed our graduates into Columbia, CHOP, And as you know, Danielle's going to Children's next year. Surgical oncology is perhaps the second most competitive match. This year we matched a resident into Memorial Sloan Kettering, last year MD Anderson, and for each of the last 3 years, our own integrated program here at MGH with Brigham and Women's Hospital. And similarly, we've had really high-level matches in other specialties too. And so I'd encourage you as you explore residency programs around the country to see how their graduates do in terms of where they match for the next stage in their career. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Denise G., who's one of our Associate Program Directors and our Director of Simulation. Denise?
Thanks, John. And today I'll talk a little bit about our resident education and simulation training. So at MGH, simulation is an institutional priority and plays an active role in all specialties. Our Central Simulation Center is known as the MGH Learning Laboratory, which is an American College of Surgeons accredited education institute. And we're also part of an elite group of fellowship programs focused specifically on surgical education research and simulation. In addition, we're an official regional testing center for all of the fundamentals programs, including FLS and FES, which, as you know, are required for general surgery board certification. The Learning Lab uses a hub and spoke model where the hub consists of a simulation ward and simulation ORs where interdisciplinary team training occurs. The spokes are the satellite skills labs, which reside more locally within each specialty for more convenient access. Our surgical skills lab is shown here, where our residents spend a great deal of their time practicing anywhere from laparoscopic skills to basic suturing to bowel and vascular anastomosis. In addition, we have a robotic simulator as well as the GI Mentor, which is the actual simulator that the FES exam is given on. So our residents have the advantage of being able to practice on it directly. We have a robust longitudinal surgical simulation skills curriculum, mandatory for categorical residents, that runs weekly throughout the year and follows the ACS APDS surgical skills curriculum. Each month is devoted to a discrete skill, and each week residents are assigned to small groups in order to practice that skill. On the last week of each month, we hold the OSATs, where residents are tested on the skill by a faculty examiner. I'll let these photos that you see on the slide speak for themselves. In the top row, you can see that our faculty are extremely engaged in this curriculum. Each week, 1 to 2 attendings come to the session and work very closely with a small group of residents. Similarly, faculty are an active part of the OSAT's skills testing, and residents value this experience as an opportunity to obtain direct personalized feedback from some of the world's most renowned surgeons in their field. Another unique part of our curriculum is the active role that our lab residents and education fellows play. Each week, 3 to 4 of them are present to help reinforce the skills taught by the faculty, and you can see this in the bottom row of photos. Of note, in the first 2 photos, you see our previous education fellows, Dan Hashimoto and Sophia McKinley, working with junior residents very closely. We really work to foster a culture of mentorship and teaching. And in fact, during her fellowship time, Sophia won the National Resident Teaching Award from the Association of Surgical Education. I'll now pass this on to Dr. Naomi Sell, one of our residents, whom Dr. Kadad and I had the pleasure of working with in her research years.
All right, thank you, Dr. G. Okay, and so I'll get the opportunity to tell you a bit of what surgical research is like here at Mass General. We'll go next slide. Now, research is truly an exemplary opportunity here at Mass General, and we're really fortunate in that we are the #1 surgical department in Boston in total research expenditures. And last year alone, we had greater than $1 billion in research revenue. The reason that I highlight this is that because it allows really for groundbreaking research in fields such as cardiac surgery, transplant surgery, and really all surgical specialties that we foster and grow here at MGH. And in fact, last year we were the top surgical department in the US with over $30 million in NIH research awards. Next slide. And now how that translates to you as future residents at MGH is that we can really then afford unparalleled opportunity and flexibility in your research pursuits. And as you can see on the left, we have residents do research in a variety of fields, And we all truly believe that you can pursue anything that fits into your academic surgical plans. The majority of us go into our research time after our third clinical year. And while many, like myself, take the traditional 2 years, we have had residents take anywhere from 0 to 4 years for whatever they need to develop their academic surgical plans. And a real perk of training here in Boston is that we have so many resources here at our fingertips. And not only do we have the tremendous research labs within our own department, with our own attendings that we are lucky to work with every day, but we also have residents work and collaborate with other hospitals such as Boston Children's and also other institutes such as MIT and the Broad, just to name a few. And of course, we have all the opportunities that are available here at Harvard. And what a lot of our residents do there is it allows them the pursuit of advanced degrees such as an MPH or an MBA to really allow you to have the tools necessary to build your future career as a leader in surgery. And we're also very fortunate here in that during our research time, our funding is guaranteed so that you don't have to worry about that with going into your research time. Yet with that, we do train you to have the skills to go and practice grant writing and really hope that you build this crucial skill so that you can learn and then plan to apply to at least one grant during your research years over that 2 to 4 year period. And we also have moonlighting opportunities for you to pursue as well to keep up some of your surgical skills and as an additional source of income there as well. And so next I'd like to introduce to our fantastic intern residents or interns for 4 more days, Nora and James, and they'll let you know a bit about the MGH culture and life here in Boston.
All right, thanks so much. So James and I, we both did sub-I's here, and we are so honored that Dr. Mullen and Dr. Lilimo asked us to be a part of this webinar. For both of us, you know, this rotation was the best rotation that I did in all of medical school, and I'm so disappointed that we won't be able to welcome sub-I's this summer. And I think the most important thing that I learned as a sub-I here was that the resident family here is phenomenal. And I think when you're interviewing at places, you're doing sub-I's, you want to figure out where's the program that you're going to be able to grow, not only professionally, because, you know, lots of training programs can do that, but what are the programs that will also support you personally? And I can say, you know, I witnessed it firsthand as a sub-I and then now as a resident, that our program and our residents really support each other. We are one big family. Here's a picture of Thanksgiving at Dr. Mullen's house. Him and Mrs. Mullen invite us over every year. And I think it's also important that our program is composed of a very wide array of different people from different backgrounds. We are a majority women program, and we're really proud of that. We have 1/8 of our program are underrepresented minorities. And then on the personal front, 26 of our residents are engaged or married. Personal happiness is really important to us here, and that's clearly true. There's 21 children, lots of babies. And I think the most important stat that you'll probably see in this entire slideshow is that we've had no attrition in the past 5 years, and we're really proud of that.
I think also what's not on this slide, but kind of warrants mention is we have people from all over the country. We have people from the West Coast, from the Northeast. I'm from Dallas. One of our co-interns, Linz, is from Montana, and it was telling a story today how she was, I think, 4 or 5 years old when she was, you know, driving motorcycles around the ranch. We have a very diverse residency, and I think that makes that kind of family bond that much stronger. People also have very diverse backgrounds. We've had former nurses. We've had one of our rising threes was a military helicopter pilot. We've had people who have gotten their PhDs and were scientists before they went to medical school that are now here training to be general surgeons. So I think, you know, former college athletes. There's a wide range of people here, and I think you know, it speaks to the, you know, diversity that you'll get and that you might miss by not doing a sub-I that we kind of want to portray here.
Next slide. And then here we just wanted to show some of the photos from the events that we've had throughout the year.
Yeah, so, you know, kind of along those lines, we have events that kind of happen throughout the year, numerous events that happen throughout the year. Some traditions like Santa rounds, which you see in the top right of the slide. the interns every year at the MGH admit Santa Claus to the hospital, and you give a grand rounds as an intern class to the entire department, kind of explaining Santa's hospital course in the hospital, and sometimes there's a video that goes with it. This has been a tradition for decades, and it's a very cool annual occurrence that happens here. Now we have the chain show every year, which is our kind of send off for the graduating chiefs. That's a lot of fun. The Mullins, our program director, has anyone who's in town for Thanksgiving and is off at night. He has them over, him, his wife, and his family have us over for a Thanksgiving meal if we can't go home. We have the annual Christmas party, which you see here in the bottom right. It's the entire Department of Surgery. Formal event. It's a lot of fun. A ton of faculty show up. All of the residents show up. It happens every year. It's highly anticipated. Everyone's hoping it happens this year. Hopefully all the COVID stuff allows this. We have our MGH versus Brigham softball game. And then we also have a resident versus attending softball game, which I think you see here at the bottom left. We have an annual Red Sox game and an annual Celtics game that Dr. Mullen, Dr. Lilimo take us to. So you see the Red Sox game there in the center of the slide, and the top left is in the Celtics box at the TD Garden. We have an annual ski trip, and the list goes on, but I think this kind of speaks to what I was saying before, that there's a very strong kind of family bond here. And I think that was one of the things that really stuck out to me when I did my sub-I here last year. I think that's one of the main kind of intangible items that drew me here. You're going to hear about all the tangible stuff and all the great reasons on paper why I think MGH is a great training program, but I think this stuff is equally as important.
Next slide.
And then finally, I think living in Boston, some of you may be from the Northeast, some may have never been to the Northeast before, but Boston is a great city. There's great sports teams. Hopefully sports are back up and running, but even if they're not, you have the Esplanade, which is on the top right. The Charles River, which kind of runs right through the middle of the city, has a beautiful kind of pathway and bike, path where we meet up with other residents out there, and you can just spend a nice summer night on the river. You have the Museum of Fine Arts, the public gardens in the top center there are beautiful, kind of outdoor, publicly maintained city garden. So I think it's a great city. It's a great place to live for 7 years. And it's a great family here at the MGH residency. I think next we'll turn it over to Dr. Colson and Dr. Sund, the chiefs of thoracic and cardiac respectively, and they'll talk to you about the 4-3 CT program.
So I'll kick off talking a little bit about the 4-3 and why we've elected to go that way. Those of you who are interested in cardiac and thoracic surgery will be aware that over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of interest in innovation around the training paradigm and the creation of the I-6 program, where you just enter directly into a CT program right from the get-go. We've actually not gone that direction. We've decided to stick with the classical format. So we have residents that enter our training program after completing a general surgery residency, and an increasing number of people that come in through the 4-3 program right from our own general surgery program. There are a number of reasons for that, not the least of which is that you can see from what you've just heard that the general surgery program at the MGH is something not to be missed. I think that it's very unique, the culture of it. You learn so much from each other as residents. It's a really fantastic experience, and by sticking with a 4-3 format, then the residents that ultimately end up with us are well integrated into that. So they're part of the family with Naomi and company. So we think that would be a loss to miss out on that, the very unique culture. The 4-3 format also allows more flexibility. It allows you more flexibility in terms of research, how many years you want to do, because there's a larger pool of residents in the general surgery program, and so there's more flexibility there. It also allows you the flexibility to change your mind, quite frankly. If you start off thinking that you want to do cardiac and you discover that you fall in love with thoracic, you've got time to make that adjustment early on. which incidentally we think is one of the great strengths of our program. I don't think there are many that have as balanced programs. We have, immodestly, we have fantastic thoracic surgery and we have fantastic cardiac surgery. Both of them will stand toe-to-toe with any program in the country. So that balance amongst all the programs, it's good for you to have flexibility in that. And our 4-3 program does have 2 tracks, a cardiac track and a thoracic track, which Dr. Colson is going to discuss with you. Yolanda. You may be muted, Yolanda. I don't hear you. Yolanda, you're muted, I think.
It appears she's also frozen as well. While we figure that out, I could just go ahead and talk about the experience of being a trainee in the program. So I did general surgery here, and I'll tell you that completing general and cardiac programs through the 4+3 has been a real treat. In addition to the things that Dr. Sant has said, I can't say enough how important the benefits in terms of relationship building are. Even though it's really a sum of 3 years of training, if you count the halves the way they are, it feels like you've been with the folks, with the attendings on the service for 5 years or more, depending on how you do your research. You know, as a PGY4, because they knew me for 2 years, I showed up and they were very willing to just throw me in and teach me the fundamentals. And then as a PGY5, this is before I started the formal fellowship, I was still in general surgery. I was functioning as a primary surgeon on big pump cases, transplants, complex aortic work. It really moves you along further. And as I'm coming, you know, towards the latter parts of my training, I 100% feel prepared to go out and really take on whatever. Additionally, I really can't emphasize the camaraderie that you really build through the 4-3 program. You're simultaneously part of the general surgery group, and you're treated fully as one of the general surgery trainees, so that by the end, you really feel like you know the attendings, you know the residents, and you can go out and practice general surgery if you want. My cardiac program director is here, so I should be careful with what I say, but you know, the thought of doing general surgery went through my head because I was ready. I could do it. And this altogether, this training really made me a much better doctor and makes me a more competent cardiothoracic surgeon because of it. At the same time, even in general surgery, you're part of the cardiothoracic community right from the early stage. So you're invited to dinners and speakers and all the events, even as a general surgery resident. And this is great because, again, you build the camaraderie with a group of CT fellows. And I look back to the people who are coming up to the 4-3 program as I'm heading up towards the chief here and know them all. And then when they come on service, I'm ready to welcome them in, and they can really hit the ground running when they show up. So this is really excellent. And I'll just finish by saying, you know, James and Nora really hit this in the head, but I've really been able to build a family through both the general and CT surgery programs. Some of my best friends are here, and many of the co-residents are truly like family to me, and I could call them in for anything at all. So if you asked me, you know, coming towards the end of it, how I do it, I would do it the exact same way. I think 4-3 is the way to go.
Yeah, and I just got a text from Yolanda. Somehow she lost her connection. So I'll speak to the block schedule very, very briefly, and if she logs on, she can say hello. Point is, we have 2 tracks: a thoracic track, a cardiac track. You get plenty of exposure to the opposite service, whichever track you're on. A sufficient amount for you to be a well-educated surgeon in the chest. Important aspects include the enrichment. So thoracic enrichment means that you spend time in interventional pulmonary and endoscopy and so on. The medical sister specialties, if you will, radiation oncology, that you really need to understand and be a part of if you're a modern thoracic surgeon. And in the same way on the cardiac block schedule, which you can see in front of you there, you spend time in the cath lab, you spend time doing echocardiography, and you spend time doing transcatheter valve work as well, because structural heart work, catheter-based valve stuff is a part of a basic training program. So you can have an innovative cardiothoracic training program without being an I6 by embracing these sister specialties. So
Thank you, Tor and Shauna, for that great overview of the.
So Yolanda's back. She may tell a little bit about the selection process.
good.
So actually, thank you, and I'm sorry that it went out. What I think is really great about the 4-3 program is the fact that during your rotations in general surgery, we actually get a chance to meet and work with all the residents that are on the service. And then during the research years, we can also work and really help develop what we think are your interests. And through that process on the 4-3, I think that we find out what really works best for you, how we can help you. And then in going through that process, we can really match up the residents with where they want to go. And then, you know, what is it they need out of their research years? Do they need 1 year? Do they need 3 years? What's the best way to do that? And then we go through a formal interview process in order to do that. And I think we've done really well at matching the program to what the candidates need. And we've been very pleased, and I think the residents have been very pleased with kind of that personalization.
Great, thanks, Yolanda. For the last 20 minutes or so of the webinar, we'd like to answer your questions. I see that several of you have submitted questions already, and we're going to start with a few of the questions that were submitted in advance. First question is for Dr. Cameron. What does surgical autonomy look like at the MGH, and how does a resident develop this?
Thanks, Dr. Mullen. That's a great question. And I think it really does highlight one of the strengths of the program, which I'm reflecting on this week as I approach graduation and think about really taking the lead in the OR in practice. Operative autonomy at the MGH shows up in different ways at different levels. And it starts as early as your intern year. Our Baker services are designed such that there's a chief resident and an intern that work closely together as a pair. And there are certain services, our hepatobiliary service is a perfect example of this, where there's graduated autonomy in the operating room that incorporates both the chief and the intern. So for example, as a first opportunity for autonomy, the chief might take the intern through an anastomosis. And once they demonstrate competency there, they're advanced further and get to do more and more of the operation. Another example, which my co-chiefs and I have really taken advantage of in these last few months of the year, is to scrub with each other. I have a fond memory of my chief year with Dr. Lilimo being very generous in his operating room and having one of my co-chiefs and I get to do a full case together. He was there and offered his wisdom at each step of the way, but it gave us the confidence to know that we could do that case.
Great, thank you,
a lot of opportunities.
Next question is for Dr. G. Do any of your simulation program, does your simulation program use cadavers?
Yes, absolutely. We use we use a lot of inanimate models. We also use cadavers, pigs, as well as ex vivo samples. And so two of the courses that the senior residents actually take are American College of Surgeons based trauma courses, Asset and Atom, and one is with the pig and one is with cadavers. And that used to be just a PGY 4 and 5 level course. But now we actually pair them up with the more junior residents, the PGY 1s and 2s. So that's an experience to actually work on a live model. We also have done laparoscopic courses on pigs in the past, as well as we recently started introducing cadavers in our robotic training curriculum. And so we actually bring in a whole extra robot into our animal lab and actually bring the cadavers there. And that's a great opportunity for not only our general surgery residents to practice, but we also make it multidisciplinary so other residents participate as well.
Great, thanks, Denise. Next question is for Dr. Sant and Colson. How do you select the 4-3 trainees? Are there a limited number of spots from each general surgery class?
Yolanda, do you want to field that or you want me to?
I already kind of talked a little bit about the process of how we go through and really get to know the residents about how to do that. And then we have 2 thoracic and 2 cardiac fellows that are residents that are chosen to go through. And depends on, the process depends on if they have done 5 years and then want to do 2 years, or 4 versus 3. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Tor?
Yeah, so we're limited by the size of the residency. So we have 4 a year, so we can take 2. In theory, we could take 2 in any given year out of the general surgery program. In theory, we could take 2 thoracic track and 2 cardiac track. And that's limited by the size of our program. Having said that, in general, what we've discovered is that, as I said, there's a certain flexibility with the 4-3 format. We've not had on the cardiac side, we've not had to decline anyone a position. Occasionally, on a couple of occasions in thoracic, there's been greater interest than there was capacity, and then discussions with folks what they want to do. Some have decided to take a little extra time in the lab. Others have decided to get the advanced training someplace else. But yeah, the realities are that there are only so many spots, and we just have to live within that.
Thanks, Tor and Yolanda.
So, John, might I interrupt? Many of you who might be interested, particularly in the I-6 in cardiac, will say, well, I only will have to match once if I match in an I-6 program. The good news is the cardiac and thoracic attendings are so integrated into our match process and our interview process, and will be this year, whether it's personal or virtual, likely virtual, they have significant contributions into our match list. And I won't say we set aside 4 slots for them, but we are very careful that if Tor or Yolanda says this person looks like a great candidate for cardiac or thoracic, to make sure that they are matched accordingly. So people don't have to worry about going through a second match process. And finally, as Tor said, if you change your mind, you're not bound to it. And I think that's important, because how you guys can make decisions on what you want to do at your stage of your careers is beyond me. We want to continue to allow the flexibility.
If you start an I-6 and after the second year you decide you want to do Whipples, you're kind of stuck a little bit. We've got the ability to go both ways, and underneath all of this, we're so accustomed to it that maybe we don't call it out. We actually all get along with each other. So you'll hear people interviewing saying, well, I'm afraid to tell them I'm interested in cardiac because they won't take me. It's fine. It's fine. John and Keith are happy to have people that are interested in cardiac. And if you start and you change your mind, that's okay. The product that we want at the end are well-trained surgeons that are happy doing what they're doing. That's the objective. You will be a happier person, a more productive surgeon, a better surgeon. You'll have a greater impact on the human beings you take care of if you're in the specialty you love. So I think it's a huge advantage to have that time to really decide where your passion is and then follow it.
And it's really the best of both worlds, because you get all the general surgery training up front, which makes you a better CT surgeon, and you have the time, and we're involved so much with that time in your training that you're getting this special attention. You can do extra cases, you can build that, and then you get kind of all the unique rotations that on that diagram we had in blue, which are like the I-6. So you get other rotations you wouldn't get in a normal 5-2. So you actually get kind of the best of the I-6 and the best of the 5-2.
Fantastic. This is a question for any of the residents or maybe Shauna. And with a place that has so many fellows like MGH, how does that impact the operative experience of the residents?
Yeah, no, this is great, and something that I was wondering when I was starting myself. I think the first thing is that we actually don't have that many fellowship programs here. Many of the surgical subspecialties, like colorectal, for example, don't have any fellows, and the general surgery residents are really prioritized in that they take charge of services, they run services, and they are thought of as the primary trainees in many of the services. In things like cardiac and thoracic, where we do have fellows, we incorporate the residents as seniors on the service as well. And there are opportunities for you to learn alongside the fellows and learn from the fellows as well. But I will say, throughout my training, I didn't feel like I was losing anything to fellows at all. That there were not too many times I was in the operating room, competing with fellows, and when I did, I felt like I was really learning from them. A lot of places have much heavier fellow counts than we do, and I think it ends up being a good thing for us. As you can see from our case numbers, we're really not struggling enough because
and no pediatric surgery fellows. That's why we have such a spectacular history in pediatrics.
So the time on pediatrics is excellent. I was doing advanced, T fistulas and large sarcomas as UI4 in pediatrics. Those are senior pediatric surgery fellow cases. So,
in follow-up to that, there's a question for the interns. What's the resident operative experience like as an intern?
Yeah, I think we have a great operative experience. There's a lot of NP and PA coverage on pretty much all the services that you'll be on as an intern here, which allows you to get down to the ORs most days, actually. So I think I've probably done, for example, on one of our surgical oncology services, I might have done 20 or so melanomas with just myself and an attending across the course of a month. And that was just 1 month. I've done like open J2 placements this year. I've done a lot of hernias and choles, both here and at some of our other hospitals we rotate out, like Newton Wellesley. So I think the operative experience here as junior residents is actually, I think, some of the best that I encountered on the interview trail. I don't know if Nora has any thoughts, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, and I would echo what Shauna actually said about pediatric surgery. It's really nice that we don't have fellows. There's actually one day that there was a Morgagni hernia repair, and I, as the intern, got to do a pylori myotomy, which is awesome.
I'd also like to mention one more thing that I think Dr. Cameron mentioned before, one of our chief residents, but there's a lot of opportunity as an intern to work with the chief, and they will take you through bowel anastomoses and kind of more senior level, operative experiences. And I think it's just valuable for them to learn how to teach, and then valuable for us to be learning from them and see, how you progress in the residency. So that's also kind of a special part of our intern year.
Great, fantastic. There's a number of questions that I think are up my alley, and I'm going to answer them just sort of in sort of one after the other. We do occasionally have IMGs in our program. It is a tall order because it's helpful if we get to know you in advance, perhaps as like a research fellow or something. We don't have particular cutoffs for our scores, like our USMLE step scores. I do realize that USMLE step 1 is going to a pass-fail after next year. And so step 2 will probably take on some added importance. But as it stands for this coming year, you don't necessarily have to have a step 2 score to be evaluated if you've already taken step 1. There are a number of questions about how to optimize your application, and maybe we can get to those two, maybe at a subsequent webinar. Other questions for candidates who have expressed an interest in cardiothoracic surgery. Does the program director look at them askance and only want them to want to do general surgery? And obviously, because we have a 4-3 program, I'm very interested in looking at people who are interested in cardiothoracic. So I'm not one of those program directors who assumes you're going to an I6 and therefore won't interview you. Let's see. We've got lots of questions coming in here now. But
John, apropos that point about cardiothoracic trainees, we have 2 interns coming in this year with interest in cardiac surgery.
Yes.
And 2 last year.
We have a question, Dr. Lillimo. What structures are in place to mentor residents, particularly MD PhDs, looking to do lab-based translational research?
So as Naomi implied, research is not mandatory here at the MGH. We realize that someone has committed 3, 4, 5 years to getting their PhD, they may want to just go right straight through their residency. So we accept that. I'd say it's probably about 50-50 as to those who take time off and want to do sort of postdoc work, and those that go straight through. We love having the MD PhDs who want to go to the lab. They have a greater chance of being successful and contributing in terms of their research being more productive and getting funded with a training grant or the like. So we welcome it, but we certainly don't mandate it. And we really leave it up to the individual as to where their career is going, how it fits with what they want to do in their career in terms of clinical fellowships on top of the general surgery residency. So we're very flexible. We start talking to the residents sort of towards the end of the first year, and John starts lining people up, and we don't really lock it in for maybe a year after that, so they can explore all their options. But that's the one thing about our research opportunities. We try to make it as flexible for everyone, whether it's 0 years, 1 year, 2 years, and if you're interested in an advanced degree, 3 or 4 years.
In follow-up to that, we have a question about if you have a specific interest in an MBA during residency, is there any way to demonstrate this specifically, and do you have to apply to this beforehand? Certainly you don't have to do that. A number of our residents do get MBAs, as well as a number of other degrees, including MPHs and even PhDs. Many will take time off for at least 2 or 3 years and will get an MBA at Harvard Business School. And then many of those people are interested in the operations or healthcare management and may participate in one of our fellowships, working alongside the director of our physicians organization and the CEO of our hospital. That is not guaranteed, and obviously the funding for that is not necessarily provided by the department. But one of the nice things about coming to Boston is that you have all the Harvard schools at your disposal for whether it's at the Harvard School of Public Health, at the Harvard Business School, Harvard School of Education, that really can enhance your career. I have a question for, another question for Dr. Cameron is, how has the program at MGH supported residents during the COVID pandemic?
Another great question. So as the administrative chief resident this year, I was encountered with the challenge of how to adapt in the time of a pandemic, and I can't say enough about how well supported the residents were during that time. We were lucky to recognize the gravity of the situation early, and I think that was in part because we have experts in disaster relief, and many of our medical colleagues and infectious disease colleagues helped us understand the scope of the problem early. And so as a result, we started furloughing residents very early on. People had the opportunity to take breaks, be at home, try to keep everybody as well rested as possible. And I'm proud to say that nobody was admitted and everybody stayed healthy in our program during this scary time. In addition to that, we provided additional mental health resources, given that this is tremendously stressful for everyone. And we had a phenomenal psychologist who was available to any resident that wanted to speak with him at any time. Local restaurants donated meals and gave us an opportunity to sit down and at 6 feet apart and have a lunch with each other. So there were a variety of ways that the program supported us, and I was just blown away personally by how prepared the MGH was and how well we handled the surge, and now how we are slowly recovering and returning back to normal day by day.
Thanks a lot, Danielle. I have a question for Dr. G. Can you speak more to the education fellowship experience that was mentioned earlier in your webinar?
Absolutely. So we have a surgical education research and simulation fellowship. That's a 2-year fellowship that a lot of our residents do partake in. And what's nice about the fellowship is that you don't have to be 100% into that, doing solely that fellowship. So a lot of our residents, like Naomi, who spoke earlier, split their time between two different research initiatives throughout their research years. And during that time, it's really, there's a didactic curriculum, but there's really an ability for you to explore any avenue of surgical education, research, or simulation that you're interested in. So it's very organic. We really go whatever path the fellows are interested in and support them in their research. They're very productive during those 2 years. But I think what's really unique about our fellowship also is that back to fostering that culture of mentorship and teaching, is that our education fellows really spend a lot of time teaching the junior residents, helping set up the SIM curriculum, helping advance educational initiatives throughout all levels of the residency. We also have a very strong lab residents as teachers program, where a lot of our residents, when they're on any fellowship, if they're local, they'll go through that course and then be able to participate in our simulation curriculum as teachers. And then we also can give them feedback on how they're teaching.
Thanks, Denise. Another question along those lines, can you speak more about your global surgery electives and the Paul Farmer Global Surgery Research Fellowship? We've had a number of our residents pursue global surgery. We have actually a track, which you can learn more about on our residency webpage, where residents will frequently do the Paul Farmer Fellowship, often combined with a Master's in Public Health. And then typically during their 2 to 3 years of research time, typically go abroad and do research in the area of interest. It's typically, we have a satellite hospital in Uganda that we partner with, and the residents will do work on capacity building and teaching and so forth. That then leads to publications and eventually, hopefully, an academic career. The interest in this peaked probably a few years ago. I will say it's waned a little bit, but there is still some interest, obviously, in applicants today. And being in Boston is, I think, a real advantage because John Mira, who heads the Harvard program in social change at Children's Hospital, is just next door. And of course, he's on the Lancet Commission. And so a lot of our residents have played key roles in crafting some of those articles and in working alongside him. So again, it does still remain a vibrant fellowship opportunity. And if you're interested in speaking to some of our residents who've done that, just send me an email and we'll give you that address momentarily and I can connect you with them.
And I'll just add that even outside of the structured opportunities, Dr. Mullen and Dr. Littleman were kind enough to let me, in general surgery, create my own global surgery experience where I spent a total of 2.5 months in Nigeria with general and then cardiothoracic surgeons. And then in the fellowship, it's continued. Dr. Sant and I were scheduled to go on a trip to Rwanda. Unfortunately, with coronavirus, that has not happened, but that is something that we may pursue in the future. And we have strong relationships with the Aswan Heart Center in Egypt, and there are opportunities for that as well. So it's everywhere around here, and we're really proud about that piece as well.
All right, well, thank you to all our panelists. We're just about out of time. Brooks, if you could advance to the final slide. I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about our program and you're starting to get excited about the application process. I know we couldn't get to all your questions. We will be hosting another webinar on Thursday night, same time, July 16th. So if some of your friends or colleagues were unable to attend tonight, please let them know. You can register for this either through Twitter, Instagram, or on our residency webpage. And if you have any questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to submit them to that email address there. If you have a specific panelist you'd like it directed to, I can make that happen. Or if you have any particular questions that are germane to different individuals, I'll make sure that the emails find their way to them. So again, thank you.
John, if I could have the last word as sort of the chief here, I would like to say, clearly the focus of our training at the MGH is to make you a great surgeon and to prepare you for the best opportunity, whether it be within our own fellowships or competitive for the very best. But we are really focused on making you a better person. And in this day and age with so many crises surrounding us, and not just COVID, but social injustice and things like that, that really strike at every aspect of our lives, not just in the hospitals. We are committed to tackling these issues. Some of us trained in a different era, and we've learned that that era is no longer acceptable. We've made dramatic changes in the last 5 to 6 years on many of those fronts. We realize it's not enough, and we're continuing to work on a daily basis to make this program not only the best surgical experience, but the best life experience that one could have for the next 5 to 7 years.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a good evening. See you next time.